So, I mean, you've got it. It's looking good. You saw it was just barely hitting it, right? But that little bit of hitting will allow that 1/8 inch of extra Bondo you would put in it, so you won't have to. You did good.
Rick Dale built a television empire and became the face of restoration for millions of viewers. Then, almost overnight, he was erased from his own spotlight. Now, at 67, his shop is silent, and the empire he helped create continues without him. Behind the success, there were tensions, controversies, and a fall that few saw coming. So, what really happened to Rick Dale? And how did a hit show collapse the moment its heart was removed? Join us as we reveal the heartbreaking tragedy of Rick Dale. Rick Dale's rise to stardom. Before millions of viewers knew his name, Rick Dale was just a craftsman working out of a small shop in Las Vegas. He was restoring bicycles, signs, and vintage machines with his father. He had nothing to do with television ambition. It was a lifelong obsession with bringing old things back to life. He matriculated from a local high school in Boulder, but never went to college. Rick instead tried out different things until he became involved in construction, which apparently thrived until 1983, when the business went down. He needed to make money, and someone told him that people in California, particularly those who frequent the flea market in Pasadena, would be interested in the old soda pop machine in his backyard if he could fix it. He restored it, and true enough, when he took it to California, it sold for 3 times the amount he invested on its restoration. After learning how much money he could earn fixing those things, he bought all the old Coke machines and other vintage pieces as he traveled around the country. Over the years, Rick met people who wanted to sell their vintage items, and he would fix them up, then sell them to interested buyers. For Rick, his work was everything, and for a while, things went well for him. Then came 1993, when he went through a painful divorce. But Rick was a resilient fellow. Even though he had to sell his shop to pay the alimony that came with the divorce, he still put pieces he restored for sale right in front of his house. He later found the right partner in his second wife, named Kelly, who specialized in marketing. She told him that he should continue with his restoration work and leave the marketing to her, since it was her specialization. It worked, and the business boomed. But things were about to change even further. Everything changed in 2009, when Pawn Stars exploded onto cable television. The show followed a family-run pawn shop. The producers, Left Field Pictures, approached Rick to ask if he'd like to pawn the gas tank that he had listed in a printed publication. Although he wasn't interested, he did express his interest in being called upon as an expert antique restorer and metal artist in the show. With the kind of knowledge Rick has, the producers didn't even think twice, and immediately took him up on that. From then on, whenever Pawn Stars needed an expert to restore a vintage piece, they called Rick. His early appearances were brief, but viewers noticed something different. They weren't just curious about the item's value. They wanted to see the transformation. Producers saw it too, and in no time, they made another move. Having found enormous success with Pawn Stars, the producers immediately kickstarted American Restoration on the History Channel in October 2010. At its peak, American Restoration wasn't just another reality show, it was a family business. Rick wasn't alone. His team consisted of mostly family members, including his wife Kelly, who was head of business operations, his brother Ron, who worked as a picker, his son Tyler, who was the shop's foreman, and his stepson Brett Lee, who worked as a picker and salesman. His daughter Allie acted as the office manager, while his niece Michelle was in charge of the shop's merchandise. There were also Cowboy and Kyle. The projects were wildly diverse. One week, it was a 1940s Harley-Davidson. The next, a vintage Coca-Cola machine, then a jukebox, a barber chair, even rare memorabilia from high-profile clients. The variety kept it exciting. Fans never knew what would roll through the shop doors next. The ratings climbed fast. At one point, an episode drew over 6 million viewers, a massive number for cable. Rick may have had the technical know-how, but he probably didn't expect that he'd be a natural for television. While he was enthusiastic, he remained level-headed, not going over the top. The shop in Las Vegas became something of a tourist destination. People would stop in just to see the place, to maybe catch a glimpse of Rick or his son Tyler, who brought a different kind of energy to the shop. Some people stopped just to feel connected to something they'd watched on their television screens every week. Rick Dale became the face of restoration television. But with bigger numbers came bigger expectations, and expectations bring pressure. That pressure began to destroy things. The beginning of the end. The producers decided to do things their own way. They decided that Rick was being too crude and was not paying enough attention to entertaining the audience. Before long, the authenticity of the show became a central point of concern. It is true that some scripting on reality TV shows is a must, but both critics and fans of the show have pointed out a lot of things that they think look staged. There were unrealistic deadlines for big jobs that would otherwise take much longer to complete. There is one episode where Rick's brother, Ron, brings in a Coca-Cola machine as if it were owned by a customer. However, fans later found out that this machine was owned by the family and had already been fixed up. Another example is from the episode called Keep on Trucking, where the team is restoring a classic Chevrolet K10. There are lots of close-ups on Rick's and Bretley's faces to show the pressure they are under from the looming deadline, which is likely too tight for a proper restoration anyway, and hard-to-find parts magically appear at the last minute. Alongside this, while people who work in close quarters to each other are always going to argue, the level of tension and heat of some of the arguments that were shown on the show seem to be more for good dramatic TV than what would actually be realistic. Rick could hardly do anything. He watched as his life's work was being destroyed right before his eyes. The show that had gained traction because of his presence soon came crashing. The major reason for the collapse of American restoration was the decision by History Channel and production company Left Field Pictures to reboot the show in 2016. They thought they were being innovative, but they were committing a huge blunder. When Season 7 started, fans were shocked by what they saw. Instead of Rick's restorations, the season introduced 5 entirely different shops scattered around the country. Body Stroud's custom car shop in California, Dale Wachsler's motorcycle museum in North Carolina, Andy Bowman's tool restoration business, Steve Hale's hot rod operation, and Bob Halliday's antique appliances. The network officials believed this new direction was necessary and offered practical benefits. They believed that a single workshop could only produce so many storylines per season, given the complexity of real restorations. So, they expanded by spreading production across multiple shops. History gained more inventory of projects, more geographic diversity, and a hedge against production delays if one restoration stalled. On paper, that looked cool. But the viewers didn't see it that way. They saw the change as a betrayal. Everyone knew the heart of the show was the Dale family and their quirky Vegas crew, and it was suddenly gone with no explanation on air. Fans had invested in the personalities, not just the objects, and the sudden erasure of the entire cast felt disorienting. It became obvious that Left Field Pictures was basically casting aside Rick Dale. They couldn't be bothered with the man who had made the show a success. They were only concerned with expanding their franchise. Fans were blindsided by the unreasonable decision, but what happened afterward only deepened the confusion. Although fans were furious, when American Restoration came back for Season 7, they still tuned in hoping to, at least, see the familiar faces, the familiar workshop, and the familiar format they had come to love. But they saw something completely different. Rick Dale and his crew were gone. The entire crew that fans had watched for years had been removed from the show without so much as a goodbye episode, a final reveal, or any acknowledgement that they had ever existed. It was only then that fans realized Rick's show had been canceled after 5 years. One can imagine the dismay of its loyal viewers from all 87 countries where it was aired, with an average of 2.9 million viewers each week. This move from the network surprised many people, but they could do nothing more than try to find out what happened to their star. So what really happened to Rick Dale? The Rick Dale controversy. Rick Dale may have been America's sweetheart in the restoration business, but he had some problems of his own that needed restoration. Right from the early success of American restoration, many people questioned the show's authenticity. Rick Dale's style was to return items to showroom condition, making them look as if they had just rolled off the factory floor. While casual viewers were dazzled by the shiny paint jobs, purists criticized the approach as erasing historical patina and character. In online forums, reviews, and even collector communities, debates flared about whether Rick's methods actually diminished the historical value of artifacts. Some people believed a jukebox that bore the scars of decades of use was more authentic than one sandblasted and beaten into perfection. This critique was not just theoretical, as it showed a real divide between restoration as entertainment and restoration as preservation. Many people believe that he was bound by a non-disclosure agreement. It's true that NDAs are a standard part of television contracts, but in Rick's case, the effect was damaging. The lack of transparency also fueled speculation, rumors, and serious resentment. Rick maintained his silence initially, but this only helped reinforce the suspicions that the show's reality was heavily managed. For Rick personally, the NDA problem was particularly painful. His livelihood had become tied to the visibility of television, yet he was legally prevented from sharing his side of the story. The result was that both he and the show lost control of the narrative. While some sided with Rick, other people said he had become difficult to work with. Others said that he demanded a higher fee, while some claimed that his work had become shoddy and that he lost sight of what had made his business a success, which was his attention to detail. For instance, there was a report that an 80-year-old man by the name of Angel Delgadillo hired Rick's services and even let his show, American Restoration Film, in his own memorabilia shop to let Rick repair a vintage jukebox. They came to an agreement that Angel would pay Rick $4,000 to have it restored to its original condition. However, when Angel received the jukebox, it wasn't what he expected. On the outside, it was cleaned and polished, but it wasn't working. The problem was that Rick had already cashed the check, and Angel had a hard time reaching him for an explanation. It was only when the story became viral that Rick took the appropriate action and had it repaired without additional expense. While Rick had restored some items beautifully, viewers noticed that there were times when some of Rick's crew were not that serious about the restoration process, and they ended up with shoddy work. They easily spotted chipped paint on restored items, and one time when his team restored an old go-kart, it ended up with wobbly tires because they weren't mounted properly. It was Rick's job to ensure that the finished product was as great as he promised his clients, but it was disappointing for some viewers to see substandard results. It didn't take long before fans heard from Rick again, as he posted an emotional video, not really explaining what had happened, but clearly hurt and displeased by it. He thanked everyone who sent messages of support on Facebook, and before ending the short video, he encouraged his fans to leave their complaints to the official American Restoration page on the History Channel website, saying that it was important to let everyone know what they all felt about it. Viewers realized their idol didn't leave on his own. He was fired, along with his crew. One fan initiated a petition to the network to keep Rick in the show, but it only attracted a few signatures, so nothing came of it. However, some things can't be changed. With Rick on the show, it was successful, but without him, the show was not even renewed for another season after the 7th. While some viewers acknowledged that it was a good show, it wasn't as successful as the first 6 seasons. The show only lasted 1 season after the departure of Rick's Restorations and was ultimately canceled. American Restoration may have ended, but what happened to Rick's own enterprise? Losing his own business. Rick, having a powerful show like American Restoration behind him, didn't have to advertise Rick's Restorations. Customers who watched the show could easily find him. In fact, they wanted to find him. People come from across the country with their vintage items, their family heirlooms, their pieces of personal history, because they had seen what the restorer could do, and they trusted him with their precious things. The show was like an ongoing weekly advertisement that reached millions of people for free. So it wasn't surprising that when it was canceled, the steady stream of new customers who had discovered the shop through current programming dried up in a way that the business simply couldn't sustain. Given his popularity, people probably expected that he could keep his customer base despite not being on TV. Unfortunately, this is not the case. His own popularity was nowhere near enough to hold up the business. Following their departure from the show, Rick's Restorations closed its doors, never to be opened again. Most of his fans felt it. It looked like Rick had dipped his hands in a jar of bad luck. First, he was removed from the show without any explanation whatsoever. Then, the shop that had been the heart of everything he'd built was gone. The place where so many incredible transformations had been captured on film, where Tyler had learned the craft alongside his father, where customers had wept at the sight of their restored treasures. That place simply ceased to exist. Online, fans mourned. Some held out hope that Rick would reopen somewhere else, that this was just a temporary setback before some kind of comeback. Others began to piece together a more sobering picture of what had actually happened, because to them, the closure of the shop wasn't the whole story. Fans were elated when Rick appeared as a guest in 2019 and 2020 in History Channel's Pawn Stars, when his expertise was called upon by Rick Harrison. However, many are still hoping to see Rick in his own reality TV show again, doing what he does best, as fans often left comments with that sentiment on their Facebook page, as they really fell in love with the show and Rick's restorations. There was a report of an alleged petition initiated by a loyal fan filed at change.org to put pressure on the cable channel to bring Rick's crew back on History Channel, but unfortunately, the petition wasn't supported by enough fans, so that it never really gained any footing. It was said that only 15 signatures were required for the petition, so clearly, not enough were interested in seeing them back on TV. Since Rick Dale is no longer on TV, where is he now? Life after the show. After his emotional short video was posted, no one heard from Rick again. It was probably because the change.org petition failed miserably. And since the rebooted show with a new cast also failed to come up trumps, he finally moved on with his life. There have been unsubstantiated rumors that Rick's restorations would make a comeback, but so far, there hasn't been any sign of it. Rick Dale hasn't just faded away, though. While he has never taken another step to be in the spotlight again, he was still active on social media, promoting his new businesses. He runs a custom laser-cut shop called My Best Font Forward Creations, and a custom embroidery shop featuring Kelly's Creations. His restoration website is still up and running, with all his store merchandise such as t-shirts, mugs, and fridge magnets, along with some restored vintage items available for interested parties. Rick's personal life is also stable, at least based on social media postings. Rick and his wife, Kelly, celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in November 2021, and it appeared they were having the time of their lives with their children and grandchildren. He has also written a book called Classic Soda Machines, showing that he is still passionate about preserving and celebrating vintage Americana, even if he is no longer on TV. It is also apparent that Rick has kept out of the limelight since the end of AR, and instead puts his effort and dedication to his craft, seemingly just on a smaller scale, though not full-size resto jobs like he used to. American Restoration may not be on TV anymore, but during Rick's participation in its first 6 seasons, it was a blast. The moment he left, the entire franchise collapsed like a pack of cards. Rick was right after all when he said, "There would be only one Rick's Restoration, and that would be American Restoration." Will Rick Dale ever make a television comeback, or is he better off without it? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.